Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Marc Barnes from New Polity, which is a Catholic think tank in Stubenville, Ohio, and they're having a conference titled Should We Therefore Destroy the Servers over the weekend of May 23rd to the 25th, and that is about the intersection between reality, technology, and spirituality. And in this conversation, Mark and I dive into that discussion. I have to say that my camera skitzed out for some reason, and so once again, you're going to be treated, if you're watching the video, with just a slideshow of the various faces that I've made throughout the years, and those faces probably will not line up to the content of the discussion. And I also apologize to rob you of the information-rich environment of my micro expressions. But Mark and I get through it well enough, and if you're listening to the podcast, you've been living without all of that excess data, and so good for you. Links to Mark's work are down there in the description, as well as links to the New Polity website and their upcoming conference, and their YouTube channel where Marc Barnes and Maria Brandell discuss at length gender in this fabulous series, which is a very in-depth conversation. Love that stuff. And what else have I got to say? But here is Marc Barnes. Wait. Whoa.
Oh, Benjamin.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Good. Sorry, let me put that there. Hey, man.
Okay.
Wow, look at this. How cool is that? You got dragons.
I do have dragons. There used to be brandy in it, but
Oh,
something
sweet.
happened to the brandy. I don't know.
It does. Wow, look
Let me
at that.
just
You get so many cool books. I just want to what is
gaze.
what's the Easter green pale teal? Yeah, yep. What's
Yeah.
that? What's that?
This guy's great. It's The Anatomy of Melancholy. Wait, where are you?
Sweet.
It's one of the biggest books ever written. There's this
Yeah.
librarian. It's like 300 or 400 years old. He just goes on and on and on and on and on about how the world is just so messed up.
Yeah,
And he
that's
just
awesome.
delights in just referencing thousands
That's
upon thousands of sources.
amazing. They don't make them like they used to, man.
No, they don't. Those librarians, how they have fallen.
I mean, it used to be you wrote about something and you're like, all right, so to begin with, we need to discuss, the book of Genesis and new geological findings in order to talk about, yeah, it was like a tradition of writing about everything when you were writing about something, which
Yeah,
just
no,
you're
absolutely.
not allowed to do that anymore. I don't know of anyone doing that.
What's your sign say? Based, red-pilled, tradwife? Are you guys doing something about memes? Are you working on a meme plex?
Yeah, it's our big we're just we're just workshopping it. Yeah. Yeah, we got the analytics back and yeah, we're really not hitting our meme numbers. And so
Yeah, meme threshold.
we're doing some research. We got the game So You Think You Can Meme. We're playing that for
Yeah,
hours, just
yeah.
you know,
New polity should rebrand as new memery. See
new
where it
memory.
takes you.
The
Yeah.
youth, I think, would jump right on.
Really? Do you guys are there many youths in the town of Steubenville?
Oh, and Sumo for sure. I mean, it's a very fertile town. They just keep coming.
Yeah,
The youth.
really?
Yeah, yeah, both in terms of moving here and also in terms of reproduction, which is, I mean, we are on the tail. I mean, often people hear about Steubenville as like something that is well, I should say in my little world and little circles, people hear about Steubenville as something that's happening now, but in truth, it was a locus of homeschooling families making in the 80s and 90s, making an
Oh,
exodus to Steubenville and having, 10 kids and it's
and was that based on a religious similarity between
yeah,
these
yeah, it's like
families, or was it more political?
oh, who's to draw the line here? But I think pretty much Catholic. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm sure that that was political in some ways, but I think there's a little less of like the escape the bad cities from what I've know of talking to folks and more just like more romantic back to the land
Yeah.
and
Intentional communities.
Yeah, though they wouldn't have called it that. That's the hip term. They would have
Okay.
just said, "We're going to homeschool our kids out in Ohio." Damn it, we've had enough. That's what I imagine.
Is that what happened to you?
No, but my wife's family, she grew up here, and her parents moved from Williamsport, PA, with a kind of delightfully fed up attitude. They had had their, I remember her mom saying, "We put our kids in Catholic school and they were all going to lose the faith. So we took them out of Catholic school and we moved and started homeschooling."
Huh.
That was her solution. Um, Seemed to check out.
Yeah. Are you
Yeah.
guys doing homeschool now?
It's not a super relevant. No is the short answer. But
Okay.
also, our oldest is 5 years old, and
Oh,
education at that age is a lot of just keeping pace with what God and nature are doing in the child.
yeah, yeah.
Have you ever? I find this frustrating. People
Yeah.
capitalize on this. They're like, they'll sell you a toy, and they'll be like, "This toy will teach your child hand-eye coordination." It'll say it on the tag, and you're like, "Yeah, that's because it's an object in the physical universe. You don't get to like take credit for that."
Yeah.
It's like when Coors Light says like our beer is cold. It's like, no, that's what we do to your beer. You don't get to take. That's not why
Fair
it's a
point.
weird
Fair point.
it's a weird world out there,
Yeah.
Benjamin.
Well, yeah. Well, you teach hand-eye coordination by throwing a ball at your kid's face
Exactly.
randomly,
Gotcha.
right?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
and they do the same to you, actually.
Yeah.
Turns out they're aggressors in that war.
That's
Yeah.
homeschool. Yeah. It's an Ouroboros of
Who threw the
self-teaching.
first ball?
Love the sweater.
Thank you, and to you. And to you.
Yeah.
Yours is more oh no, never mind. I was gonna say it's more subtle, and then you lean back and it's less subtle. It's
No, it's right in your face.
skulls. You've
Yeah.
worked
No, it's
skulls into your seasonal patterning.
I thought I'd get merry, Day of the Dead with you today.
Yeah, for sure. That's
I
that's
do
the
have a
key.
Christmas sweater because it would probably match yours better, but
Well,
I'm not going to
I'm out of
wardrobe
season.
malfunction my way through our talk, through our time today.
It's no worries. I,
What have
I,
you
I
been up
only,
to?
well, I mean, besides thinking about what to wear all week.
How what percentage of your time is spent on your You're not at Einstein, you don't just have like one outfit all prearranged.
No, I mean, it's a steady decline. I used to have more sense of this, and now very often my wife Maura says, "You're not leaving the house dressed like that," and pulls me back in. Usually to do with shoes. I have a favorite pair of shoes that
Yeah.
I would lovingly describe as like they look like small refrigerators. And
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah, yeah, I'm not allowed to wear those. But
S-
maybe I'm wearing them now. You wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know. Every once in a while I get your videos, especially your multiple person videos.
Yeah, that's true.
Delight the audience with your leg wear.
I'm sure you've had this experience where it's like, at some point with podcasting, it's such a weird thing to be doing that you just want to like put a strange cup on your desk and just hope that
Yeah.
someone stops listening to you and starts wondering like,
Yeah.
what I mean? There's like this interior war that happens and try to make it.
Yeah, really. Yeah, no, it's again, that's you go back to that toy that is designed to interact and improve hand-eye coordination, but like there's a whole set and scenery level to this game. A lot of people listen, but some people watch. You can
Yeah,
play with them. You can have fun with them. I have little
that's
Easter
true.
eggs behind me.
I know, I'm sure. I'm sure I like it. I mean that it's helping to distract me from the absurdity of your non-presence here. It's great.
The absurdity of my non-presence, though,
Well,
physically
yeah,
with
I mean,
you.
like it's like,
Yeah.
well, I find we do this a lot. I mean, a lot of this describes like the weird identitarianism of today, that because we're all communicating with each other through impersonal mediums, that things take on a fetishistic quality of like, I promise there's a person here. Look
Huh.
at these books that signify something of my interior life. Look at these
Oh,
these doohickeys and gadgets that signify something of my real life and the things that I do. I promise I'm a person. I'm not just a robot in here. I think that they have this quality. It's more.
yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Cars started it in a big way. I mean, you think about the first thing kind of physically posted was a bumper sticker because when you're in the car, you're you're just a driver, man. You're
Yeah.
alienated. You're in a box. You have your own little environment with its own temperature and its music, and you have an innate hatred of everyone else who's in the same position as you.
Yeah.
And so you have this impulse to personalize your little box and to show people that you're not just like everybody. And so you post coexist, or
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been to the Rockies. It's like a desperate scream that we're people.
You know, I don't know. Maybe there's something
You're
maybe it's an inborn, I don't know, talent or inclination or something that I've developed over the years, but I find that the space between me and my guest is no different through the screen as it is like in person. When I meet people in person that I've met online like that, there's really no difference to me. Like I feel like
yeah,
I'm just as close to somebody through this medium as I feel close. I can read them
yeah.
very well. Like
That's awesome.
it all melts away. I mean,
I think the beauty of it is that the word, like our
the word
we're,
logos.
we're able to communicate, you
Yeah.
know. And but I do think you have a gift here.
Well, but so this lays out a difficulty in your critique of technology is that you have to use technology in order to critique technology.
Yeah,
So
it's true.
so the but the message and the medium they coexist. Like a
Yeah,
like all the
yeah,
religions,
yeah.
just all equal.
One bumper sticker, one identity being proclaimed on one car. It's beautiful faith.
The whole world included. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, it's the great difficulty. I mean, this is always the trouble with the critique of technology. Even going through the 20th century, people like I don't know, Hannah Arendt or even Freud sometimes talks about it this way, that you only ever critique it from within it and looking up at it, like looking up from it. So, you know, Freud, for instance, has this reflection on how how amazing the train is because he can be connected to someone miles away. Space has been conquered for him. And then he immediately plunges into melancholy and says, "But of course, if it wasn't for the train, my son or my children and my friends wouldn't be so far away that I need the train to get them." And so
Yeah.
Wendell Berry's a similar way. He's a farmer out in Kentucky, wonderful writer, and he says, uh, see a way around the car uh, as necessary. And this is a man who really, really worked at doing without some of the major technologies that we see as just, utterly basic. But he couldn't see his way around the car. So I think the sense of being constrained to a certain third party in order to carry out the basic functions of life and to attain the happinesses available therein, really, that is one of the primary motivators of the critique in the first place, you
Mm.
know? But in some ways, the poison is the cure. In some very limited ways, I would say.
Okay. So you did a very smooth switching of frames. I just want to make sure that I caught it, and it's just escaping me. But you're saying that the technology requires a critique of technology.
Yeah, and what I mean is, well, I think it requires a certain justification of its use
Okay.
in the sense that I think we all have a basic sense that we don't really need the things that nevertheless seemingly increasingly surround us and through which we mediate our lives, the way we work, the way we entertain ourselves. Um, and so that non-necessity uh, strikes us and demands a justification. Why then do we use it?
Mm.
And I think the trouble is the answer is very ambiguous because in some cases, what you have is a real lack that's being remedied by the technology. And in many cases, you have a lack that's being both caused and remedied by the same technology. That's
Yeah.
the Freud example. The train
Yeah.
is both destroying space and then healing
Yeah.
the results of that destruction.
Well, but lack could also just be value neutral, like just like a opportunity space, right? Like a
What do
market.
you mean?
Um, the lack that, let's say, a cell phone fills is just idle time. Potentially. It's just potential time. And the cell phone like goes into that lack and then expands upon that lack. And then within the cell phone are all these apps, right? Where you find even further voids or lacks or potentials that are then populated with things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's true. I don't know that I would describe it as value neutral because, um,
Mm.
most of these phones, especially, but most technologies are designed to perpetuate the lacks that they heal, and you know, they create something that I've noticed. For instance, I don't notice it much anymore because I don't do as much texting. But I don't know if you remember this when people started to use emojis. I know we're thinking way back to when this was even relevant as like
Oh wait,
some
are you talking just text-based emojis or like when they
text-based emojis. I'm going back
okay.
to the root
Just
technology.
colon and a parenthesis smile.
Colon parentheses smile, but no, I guess really I'm talking about the moment that we were first given access to a library of prearranged shapes to
Okay.
express our emotions. So we had these hieroglyphs that we could manipulate. Wonderful. The power we had instead of having to sort of suffer through a thumbed out description of our emotional state, of how you made me feel, of why I was breaking up with you, etc. It was simply you just pick your face. You got a little
Yeah.
tear coming out, okay. Now, what I noticed is that this power, which began as a addition to human life, it said, look, we can give you something that now you can do. Look at the speed with which you communicate emotion. Aren't you amazing? You're sort of God amongst men vis-a-vis the person you used to be who had to slavishly
Hmm.
type out, I'm feeling hurt right now, but a little ironic and cute about it at the same time,
Yeah.
Those days are over. But I noticed back in like high school that then what was sort of established was a growing nervousness of being understood without the emoji. And this is true not just of that technology, but of the technology of the haha or the JK, and also the text-based, parentheses, colon, smiley face, things like that. It had a
Yeah. Okay.
prehistory. Now, if you send a text that says, I'm here, and you don't put a smiley face, there's the slight alarming possibility everyone feels that I'm here is said with a kind of anger or hostility.
Yeah.
So the emojis that, at first became this ability to add to human life, to give us a capacity, gradually become more and more necessary. Like we are less able to communicate our emotions without the use of that third party largely provided to us by
Yeah.
Apple, say.
Yeah.
And that's just a little example. I'm not freaking out about that. That's all right. That's a little
Yeah.
thing. But I
Well,
do think it's a form that a lot of technologies take.
yeah, there's a lot there. So I'm just trying to think of my own emoji use just for an example. I use it in person to person communication.
Hmm.
When I'm twittering, when I'm just throwing out aphorisms into the void, I don't really use them unless they
Yeah,
add something.
sure.
But
Yeah,
like I
that's
could use them more to limit or to constrain interpretation because I do like very dry, sarcastic humor. It just doesn't scan unless you know
yes.
me.
Yes,
So if I
totally.
put a little emoji on there as a symbol to like a interpretive aid,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
it's not like a person to person communication like that the cringing one is really useful.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
because I need a favor, like I'm sorry to bother you, like so
Sure, sure. I can
there's
see
little
you doing it.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's like,
yeah.
you know, um,
No, I think
and
that's
there's yeah,
very insightful that when you're communicating with an anonymous crowd, it's a little less necessary and more and more you feel the need less unless you're being very deliberate about an interpretation. But I think the kind of feeling of being saved by them, by having them close to hand, by that wells up in personal communication, because you're right, that's precisely where we need each other's faces, where we
yeah.
rely so much on the intimacy of our bodies and friendship in order to communicate. I think that's
And in a sense, texting took that away, and then the emoji kind of puts that back in there, so it kind of
you said
fulfills, right?
that's just exactly what I'm trying to say. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Yeah.
No, I
Thanks,
mean
Steve.
I mean to say that
Mm.
I'm sure you've heard this said. I don't remember who said it. I'm sure many people have that um something like 90% of our technological innovations these days are solutions to technological problems. And that's a made up number. I have no idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but there is obviously in take the broadest possible category, communication, which seems to be where most of our, you know, technologies develop or innovate or have a sort of quasi fertility to them. In communication, you can almost look at every technology as trying to heal something that's created in um, the bareness that's left when you use technological modes of communication. So, like the phenomenon of feeling a need to post or take pictures of your life, your
Mm.
children to an anonymous crowd, it seems obvious to me that it's a certain desire for healing from the very mode of being in front of an anonymous crowd. And emojis are the same. I think in
Yeah.
many ways, I think pornography is like this in a major way. Um, to feel dissolved almost in a sea of images and to feel like everyone is um, sealed up within images of themselves almost. Like we have our profile picture, we have our social media account, and we communicate not through the surprising and an unanticipatable givenness of bodies being together and communities living together and surprising each other, and but rather with calculated gestures, with postings, with um, decisions about how to appear and how to sound that come not from spontaneity between people, but from, well, decision making, right? And in this world, I think there's something that appears extremely tempting about the pornographic. Not that not that it's not always tempting. I'm not saying this is like some novelty of modernity,
Yeah.
but it takes on a more salvific quality. It's like within this sea of images, one image appears to reach out and touch me in a way that I can like confirm by its effect on my body.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so it has a certain sense of like salvation from scrolling almost. Like,
Mm.
yeah.
The profile is sarcophagus.
It's good.
Another example would be I think of the same kind of the same exact thing, and the effects of this are actually probably easier to see, is in our medical system relying more and more on technology, by drugs, pharmacological
Yeah.
solutions to solve like bad diet. Like
Yeah, yeah,
instead of
yeah.
like changing your diet, you get on a cholesterol medication, which needs you to have another medication, which leads to like depression. So you get on this thing, and then you're
Mhm.
lethargic, so you get your uppers, and then
Yeah,
instead of
right.
just exercising,
Hmm.
you get on this treadmill
Yep.
of artificial treadmill. And then it's not the drugs that are the problem. It's just the reliance on the drugs just not. It requires a critique in order to interact with it. It requires a justification, like you're saying. Like, and this is like the foundation of ethics, like from a philosophical point of view. It's like, how do I use this thing? How do I think about this thing? How do I remove myself from it enough to understand that I
Yeah.
am? removed from it.
Yeah.
Because our glasses are in the same kind of technological ladder as any of the, as a cell phone.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
don't need to justify our glasses.
Right. But if you, absolutely, because technology is proper to the human. Like that's how we know there were humans, actually, is by seeing that they reacted to their environment by making tools and things and
Clothes.
stuff and order and clothes and knives and whatever in order to um, rem remedy lack, right? But it's real lack. And this is where the
Huh.
critique of technology is always, um, yeah, I mean, it's always a critique of transgressing limits in some ways, which we know because we all get a little scared about the way that technology seems to be open to a sort of indefinite, post-human, inhuman
Luciferian.
future.
Yeah.
But I think it's present in every technology because every technology says, okay, there is a real lack, and to know the lack implies that you know enough about human nature and the good that belongs to it to be able to recognize where something is lacking, like eyesight, for instance. And then the technology is developed to heal the lack, to bring you back to that um, point. But that's a finite and limited moment, right? Like if my eyes were to be healed, I wouldn't wear glasses. And if I felt like I had to wear glasses, even though my eyes were healed, you would suspect that there is some other lack being produced in me that meant like maybe I felt like I only looked cool with glasses or something.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's liable to judgment. Like you might think I'm stupid for that, and you might be right. So, anyways, that's sort of a complicated way of talking about it. All I'm really saying, if I'm arguing something in particular here, is that um, we don't live in a society that limits technologies to the fulfillment of lack. We live in a society that sees itself as riding the tailcoats of indefinite technological improvement, and that
Mm.
is involved quite actively in the creation of lack in order to be able to sell the technologies that solve it. Um, there's a Marxist way of looking at this. I don't know that I'm not saying it's like a good doctrinal position, but it is helpful maybe. Marx, when he was looking at capitalism, said that the nature of capital is such that um, it will always have to find expanding markets for products. And he was speaking geographically. I mean, he meant quite literally like once England is proletarized and it's going to move to other places, which historically has been true, right? Like in the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have spread across the entire globe. But it's also true that um, uh, the society we live in is relies on the constant production of new things for sale. Do, maybe I shouldn't presume that you agree with me on that before I keep spieling.
Oh no, I can follow you.
So the economy relies
Yeah.
on sales and the sale of new things. Stasis is not good for an economy. Growth is good for an economy. And increasingly, we belong to one global economy that needs growth as its goal, and indeed has growth as its major goal. And so what this requires is that new markets are constantly opened up. When the popes critique this, I read the popes. They just call it consumerism.
Okay.
And what they mean is that instead of seeking a definite point of rest and satisfaction, human life becomes characterized by the restless searching for new objects, and that not simply to have, but to consume and then look for the next one. And that this is of great benefit to merchants, to people whose livelihood and whose profits come from the development of and the selling of and the transporting of these new objects. So it's within this society that we are consuming technology. It's not in a society of rest. It's not in a society of clear limits and bounds and an idea of what good life looks like. The Amish, for instance, they always get, you know, the short end of the stick in conversations of technology because people think they have some sort of irrational fear of it, and that if you take a picture of them, their souls will be stolen, I think is the, and I've never actually found this to be, I don't think they think this at all, but that is what gets the myth, I guess, propagated. But what they really do, or what they really did, I don't know if they're still up to it, but is they asked because of their particular, and let me tell you, I think it's particularly bizarre religion and doctrine and understanding of the world, they deliberately ask whether each technological device, each proposed thing, new object for consumption, would be good for them. And then they deny it or accept it, usually in council, on the basis of that answer, whether it would be good for them. Which is why it's not quite the case that they don't use technology. It's like, well, they use diesel generators because they decided diesel generators would be good for them. But no, they don't use phones because they thought phones would be bad, right? And that is precisely, it's a helpful, to me, it's very helpful to think about them because it's like the polar opposite of what we have as a society at large, which is that we have no sense of here's the good proper to us, no sense of here's what it means to be who we are and to belong.
Yeah.
And so we have a sort of indefinite openness to every new device, which
Yeah.
means that when things are offered to us as a new technology, it's no longer the dialect or the what's the word? The system here is no longer need and need satisfaction, right? Rather, it is one of offering one more chance of consumption and one more chance of and like I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's sort of seeking salvation from another purchase, a new device, a new thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's that we though? I mean,
Yeah.
this is the problem. Whenever I get to the boundary of liberalism or arguing within it against it, which is what I
Yeah.
do. I am a
Yeah.
liberal, but I'm very skeptical of its foundations and its properties and whether or not it's good. But I can see that it is good, and I am a liberal. And what I see is that it's the proposition where you have the opportunity to select who you associate with and what you think is right with regard to God or the lack of God. And I will not put my beliefs on you. We will have a common code of ethic where we will attempt to delay violence as far as possible in how we manage disputes of power.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we rely on systems of rationality, procedurally generated institutions that we try to keep as non-doctrinal as possible.
Hmm.
But that's an ideal, and it's always going to be operating with some sort of dogma or some sort of belief system. Any given institution is never going to be
Yeah.
entirely free of that. But so when we critique what liberalism has given us, when I look at the world like, well, there's this the coexist thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that I have to coexist with all these other religions and still have my own religion, but also afford these other religions to exist without losing the uniqueness and the absoluteness within my own belief system. And I don't know if anybody can do that without losing or being post-belief itself.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, it seems that when you describe liberalism operating in that way, you are describing a set of dogmas and doctrines and a particular belief system that doesn't have in itself any right to, by its own arguments, doesn't have any right to being the only or the thing everyone should do, the right path. And so it ends up feeling like a scam to me because it feels like, all right, so liberalism offers the sort of coexistence of religions within itself, but only so long as those religions can coexist with liberalism. Um, it just seems like it's really the dominance of one religious system over against all others with
Yeah.
a very clever way of defending itself as not really being that.
Yeah.
Which is why I think in the actual history of the world, in the actual last 500 years, in which liberalism has kind of crystallized as the end of history, the last sort of phase, what we see is not the maintenance of great diversity of different beliefs and different faiths within a sort of neutral space in which everyone's allowed to choose or not choose. But what we have actually historically seen is the loss of belief, secularization, the prioritization of any faith that better accords with the liberal religion, with liberal neutrality, with the idea that there is no definite good, that we can't know it, even if there is one, that God is a choice we may or may not make and not something absolute. So, so you say liberalism, I say weird Christian religion that took over the world recently.
I also, yeah, I'm in accord with you. Um,
Yeah, I know. I was making you a dummy for the sake of the non-existent audience, and I apologize. It's rude.
no, they're existent, just in the future.
In the future,
They're futurely there, and we
the
were
future exists.
pastly there here.
Yeah.
Um, there was another thought, and it was kind of a test to see where you'd go with it, with regard to, you said if my eyes were healed, one would have to ask, if I could heal my eyes, one would have to ask, why do I still wear glasses? And
Yeah.
there's something going on there. Your eyes can be, let's just say that there's this technology called LASIK that can heal your eyes,
All right. I'm
and it's been
imagining.
around for 20 years now.
All right.
You could have at any time like submitted your eyes to this procedure that might have healed you and no longer have glasses anymore. So there is a lack there. Like you could have used another technology to
Yeah.
rid yourself of this
Sure.
technology. The parallel that I want to draw, just to see what you're going to do with it, is that perhaps religion is a pair of glasses and rationality or something approaching rationality. Um, uh, like the procedural, deliberate investigation of morals and ethics based on human understanding and argumentation is the LASIK for the human soul. Like, what if clinging to glasses in a world where you could have the Apple Vision Pro or whatever that is.
Don't use that one. The LASIK. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What if religion? Because I do see, at least aesthetically, and I don't mean to, bunch all atheists together, but I see like an aesthetic distaste for religion from the secular point of view. It's like, well, it's archaic, it's old, like it's like glasses, and we're living in the world of
Yeah.
bionic eyes. Like, why are you
Yeah.
still relying on that? That would assume that religion could be thought of as a technology. I don't know if that premise even holds water itself.
Yeah. The difficulty I immediately had when you said that was, um, I think God is real and the whole thing is true. Uh, Jesus Christ is God, became man at a certain time, established a church as a road to salvation, all that, right? And so the difficulty is that when we describe things technologically, we describe them not so much in relation to the truth, but in relation to some effect they have. Like, why get this certain good that you're after through religion when you could get it more effectively with uh, science or something like that, right? Like that's sort of the
Okay.
idea.
Okay.
But I think there's a qualitative difference. Like, I don't think that belief in God and hope for salvation are technologies developed to solve some other problem, like being sad in the morning or not knowing how thunderstorms work. Like that, you know what I mean? Like that's how atheists often describe religion is as a technology. And so they begin on this
Okay.
very odd foot where they say, okay, I'll tell you how religion started. It was very simple. There's a big thunderstorm. No one had science, so they didn't know what that was. So they got together in their cave and they said, let's invent God. God is loud. He goes boom, boom, and there's flashing of lightning. And now this totally bizarre phenomenon we can control through the power of religion. It gives it a story, a narrative, and now we feel safe again. It's an enlightenment narrative because then enlightenment gets to come and say, we've got science now, baby, so your religion
Uh,
is worthless because we know about electrons and charges.
okay.
But it's stupid to begin with because, um, well, there's a lot of reasons, but one of them is that it to describe thunderstorms by inventing God uh, is to invent a much more deeply complex solution to a problem than is warranted by the problem. Like, yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. To
Okay.
It seems like religion stems from the fundamental experience that existence cannot account for itself. Everything that is comes from something else. And
Yeah.
that this simply cannot go, I mean, you know, the argument can't go all the way back. There has to be a first cause. And this cause all men call God. That seems to be where religion starts from. And to describe religion as a technique for solving problems, I think, is to take our very modern therapeutic religion, where it like is good and worth believing in because it has good effects, and
Okay.
applying it to all of history.
The I don't see a difference between religion as a way of solving the question of thunder and religion as a way of solving the question of why, or just like it's still a lack. It's like, okay, if you think through, it's just like it's filling up the opportunity space of man's curiosity. It's looking for a why. And
Yeah.
the lack of like, well, what does this all mean? Why does this all cause? It's still a technology insofar as it does give a narrative. Does give, like, at least in a Christian religion, if I'm speaking correctly, it gives an arrow to time, gives a direction.
Yeah, a bit. No, I think that the question of what is true is not ever answered by what something does. So what I mean is the way
Huh.
that caricature of an argument I made about the thunder works is that at
Yeah,
the end of the day, the cavemen feel safer now, and that pragmatic fact that they feel safe is the
the
reason
truth.
for, yeah, but it's a supplanting of truth. Because the thing is, it's not true, or well, the point is that truth is not actually relevant. So you'll sometimes hear people say this all the time,
Huh.
like, well, if it makes them feel good, let them believe it, kind of thing. And it just seems like the technological
Hmm.
argument for religion is just that writ large. Like it's something people did because it, for various contingent reasons, was necessary for them to feel good and to do certain things. And now we moved beyond that need because we have other things. And I don't think that does reduce all knowing to pragmatic uh, technical problems. And I think that the desire for what is true actually works in the other direction. It
Huh.
says, I mean, you felt this surely, where like something appears to you to be comfortable. Like, man, when that thunder is raging, maybe I should pick a different example because thunderstorms don't have a giant effect on us, right? So maybe a closer. It also just strikes me as crazy because it's like, man, there are so many things that make me miserable about religion, and you know, like the lack of an ability to be comfortable and to just not care about things and to take it easy for a while. I mean, you read the book of Job, and the dominant expression of what it is to be a believer in God is, why will you not leave me alone for long enough to swallow my spit? That's what Job says to God. So this idea of the religion as this sort of I don't know, like comfort
Huh.
pill you take just
Yeah.
doesn't check out. But what I wanted to say was that I think we've all had this experience where the pragmatic fact um doesn't suffice, where we want to know the truth even if it hurts us, even if it's mysterious, even if it doesn't lead to some kind of pragmatic result.
Mm.
Like a man who thinks his wife might be cheating on him, for instance. You might say, look, man, just don't look into it because if you don't know, then it's not going to hurt you. And so then you might develop a mythology, essentially, like a technology, a way of knowing that's entirely consumed by the end of feeling good, entirely explainable in terms of a technology that you put in place in order to not feel the bad feeling and to feel the good feeling. But you can also see how a man in that situation might feel like he still wants to know the truth. The truth is relevant. And I think this is always the case.
Mm.
That even if it has utterly no pragmatic result, I want to know if someone made me. Even if there's no comfort to it, I want to know why there's something rather than nothing. Why is life worth living? I mean, these questions, it's not like religion answers them because it's just holding a place until science can answer them. It's because there's whole phenomena that are only investigatable by the search for truth itself and not by the search for solution or fact or
Yeah.
something like that.
Well, I just wonder about like what's the end of even that? Is God not even mightier and more real than man's search for meaning or truth? And I think about to
Yeah.
try to make it concrete. There's this guy that you write about, Thomas of Aquinas or Aquinas
Yeah.
de
Yeah.
Thomas
Thomas d'Aquino. Yeah.
d'Aquino.
Thomas Aquinas.
There's, and I don't know if it's a story that's real or not real, but like he was writing one day and Jesus came in, he's like, and he looked at everything that he'd written, which is like the
Yes.
foundation of, Western Christianity, if I'm not incorrect. And he's
It's a
like,
big
this is a
pillar.
bunch of
Yeah.
hay. That's just
Yeah.
hay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even I think that um I question that religion is even abound is not the truth, whatever you're calling truth is not sufficient to describe the ground
Oh,
of
sure.
being, and that there is comfort in having a spiritual practice that has a truth in it, that allows for one to say, okay, there's things that I don't know and that I won't know, or that it's for God to show me. And until then, nobody else can show. I know that nobody else can show me this because I know that this cannot be reduced into communicative properties. It can't even be reduced into religious belief.
Mhm.
This knowing that surpasses all understanding, I guess, right?
Yeah. Ben, if we were just alone in this, if we were
What do
just
you
alone,
mean?
I mean, if it was just us in the absolute, us facing the
Like
cosmos,
us as
and
in like
sorry, people,
individuals
human
or
beings. If it was just
okay.
human beings, you and I facing the cosmos and asking this question, then I think I would understand and even sympathize with with the position you're laying out there. But it's God who acts. I mean, the whole
Huh.
difference of Christianity and every other moment is that the claim is not that standing in front of the absolute mystery of being, we've come up with some answers. That's not Christianity.
Okay.
It's that standing in front of the mystery of being, we have been reduced to absolute shambles, and God, in His mercy, has revealed Himself out of love for us in His Son. Like there is a priority to God who acts. Christianity is a religion that describes something that happened and tries to hold true to it. And its wisdom is always the wisdom that comes from God, the wisdom that has been revealed. And so I can sit here and reflect on the world, but yeah. So, anyways,
Yeah.
the point of that is that I think Christianity is fundamentally different in the whole history of religion, and I would include Judaism in this. That it's a response to an event of God self-revealing, and it can't be described in terms of man's coping with like a wisdom tradition or spiritual practice by which staring into the mystery of being man came up with a certain practice or a certain road or a certain answer. This makes it really hard because it necessitates faith. Because you have to either believe that God does reveal himself or does not reveal himself. You can't simply ascertain that he has in fact done that, you know, in the same way you can't ascertain that any historical event has occurred. Like at some level, you have to believe in the past, even. So
Yeah.
you can have great evidence, but yeah.
But so here's another route, um, based on everything we've been talking about. There's this idea that's it's not really an idea. It's not like an organic idea. It's some kind of psyopy about it, and something true about it, about Christian nationalism.
Okay.
Is it possible for America to be America and be a Christian nation? And which Christian denomination is America, right? So in if we were here because of liberalism, which I think
Sure.
I agree, it's a pocket
Yes.
within
And in
Christianity.
this, I'm grateful. Praise God for liberalism. It brought me you. It brought me me. Couldn't have been any other way.
Yeah. So how does is it what gives you the confidence? Is it a matter of confidence to not need to impose the truth on others, or and
Mm,
then you have certain sects of Christianity like, no, we have to because we have to save them from hell. We have to
mm,
impose this on other
mm,
people.
mm,
But at the same time, you're saying that God reveals himself to everybody. So
mm.
who are you to reveal God to people? Like, how can you not be a liberal and act? If to be Christian is to allow God to act, is to allow other people to say, um, to choose how they use technology, to say there is no really we, there's no society here. There's just kind of this openness, this lack that you can fill however you want it. And this is how I fill it with my belief.
How is Christianity not that? Or I think I lost the
Yeah, I'm sorry. I threw
precise
too
edge
many
of the
ideas into the
question.
pot. Yeah. How can you allow for other people to make other decisions with
Oh, I
regard
see.
to
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
truth?
Well, some people I don't allow, like my children, for instance,
Yeah.
right? Like I baptized them. I didn't baptize them, but I brought them to be baptized. And their godparents received them from the font as new creations.
Huh.
And they didn't choose that per se, but neither do they choose, anything for themselves. Like they are given by nature to our care. But the reason I have the confidence, I suppose, to force that, if you will, is because um, in the same way that I shouldn't say the same way, in a very similar way to how when I feed them, I don't think that I'm forcing on them existence or like, because you can make a silly argument that says like, hey, look, your kids might grow up and think that life is in fact an absurd joke and wish to kill themselves. How dare you impose your belief in the goodness of existence, which is not at all what everyone has thought for all time, as this sort of dogmatic, position. You should let them choose to live or to die. It's very similar with gender, where it's like, how dare
Yeah.
you impose the sort of goodness of the binary if, shouldn't you let them choose at some point later when they're rational? So I think that argument is silly, but I do think that it's not completely silly. Like there is an audacity to all of our relations to people who are weaker than us when we take them under our wing and put them in directions. But if you look at all of those situations, it's because we believe in the good. We say this good which I am giving to you is real. It's real. And all the authority I have over you comes not from me as if I'm an authority in myself, but because of the good. Existence is good, and because I can affirm that, I have the authority to give you existence and not even ask you whether you want it because I'm familiar with that good. I know that
Huh.
good. And so I know, you know, and that is how I experience the church. It's not as this thing that's abstractly chosen out of a number of possible beliefs. It's an intimate, real good for the person to belong to the community of the saved, of the baptized. So when I give that good, I give it with more um, haste, I suppose, at least existential haste, than I do food to the child. Okay, but that wasn't quite what you asked. What you asked was, how do I not force it? And that's how I do force it, I suppose, on others.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
I think when you're talking about baptism as force, it's obviously I'm being deliberately analogical. I don't actually think it's force in the sense of violence because I think it's proper to the nature of the person to be baptized. So I'm giving him Christ as the air gives him oxygen is sort of how I would think of it. But how can I say, well, I'm going to let these people choose for themselves, these adults living elsewhere, I suppose is what you're asking, these other people. Well, um, it's it's simply the case that um, we really are free, and that even when God revealed himself in his son, he did not force belief, even as God himself. He allowed people to betray him. Most people left him, actually. The story of the Gospels is one of just heartbreaking disappointment, where God says, "You've longed for me, here I am." And most people say, "We're going to kill you. Yeah, you're going to die." And he takes it. Um, so in the example of the cross, I think we have the example of the proper attitude towards everyone to whom we would include everyone whom we would include under the shadow of the cross, which is to not do an injustice to God by forcing a belief when he wants the freedom of the human person, when he wants to marry them and not to rape them. I mean, we cannot evangelize in any other way than Christ himself evangelized, if that makes sense. We
Yeah.
have a model. And again, this is what Christianity is so different. It's like you can't just figure out abstractly what to do. There was a guy who said he was God. It's this Jesus over there, Middle East, that many years ago. So like when we take our model, we're not abstractly working out principles. If there was no reality, if this was just like uh I don't know, if we were just taking on a philosophical system of sorts, then maybe you would feel obligated to force people to believe it. Like if it was just abstractly true, then you know.
Hmm.
And frankly, that's what I see liberalism doing, Benjamin.
Doing what?
Well, just like liberalism has no Christ. It just has its logic. It's everyone's an individual who makes their own choice. God is sort of relevant to discussion, but we sure do promote that thing wherever we can. We like to set up military dictatorships. We like to create the material conditions by which people are basically disposed to believe themselves to be atomized individuals living under a state, that sort of thing. I
But
mean, it
there's
seems like,
liberty there, right?
well, yeah, if you can get it.
Huh.
I mean, but what I mean, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be flippant. I do that all the time.
No, no,
Uh,
I like it. That's what I
no,
like about
flippancy.
talking
No,
to
no,
you.
no. I'm going to go to confession. I'm going to confess flippancy with
Oh,
Benjamin.
jeez.
I'm going to do it.
I did not know that that was something to be confessed.
No, probably not in itself, but I imagine I'm sure you could imagine a degree of flippancy which would approach moral evil.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's flippancy that'll get me in trouble with my wife, so, which is indistinguishable from a moral failing.
That's absolutely right. No, I'm sorry for joking. What did you ask? You asked, oh, isn't there liberty there? Yeah, well, um, there is, and I don't want to knock it. Like
Well, no,
I do.
insofar as liberalism does have a moral content, it is
Yes.
exactly what you're saying about God's relationship or the state's relationship to the individual, God's relationship to the individual. You are
Well,
free. I
yeah,
mean,
I mean,
insofar as it sticks, and insofar as that is the fruit, and liberalism is the fruit of Christians behaving
totally.
Christianly.
It is a obviously a Christian thing. No serious historian would pretend it comes from anywhere else. I mean, I think it's bastardized Christianity. I think that's what's going on.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's also the case that because it's bastardized Christianity, often when liberalism meets totalitarian regimes or real lingering instances of what I would think of as paganism, but we would probably call something like authoritarianism or something like that. It often has a sort of material effect of liberating people because it, relative to the situation they're in, is way better. Because yeah, insofar as you're being ground into the dust by a dictator, say I'm just giving an extreme, then it is certainly a relief. You certainly want to join the guys who say, "Hey, no one should be allowed to do that to you. You should be able to choose your own."
Yeah, we have these things called human rights over here.
Yeah, totally.
Get them while you
Heck yeah,
can.
get them. They're hot. Use them. And I think that is basically the the principal reason for liberalism's success. And this is always the case, right? The Sorry, I'm thinking of too many things. One thing I really like about you, Benjamin, is you make me think about like six things at once, which is awesome. But then it's like I need to have a little
Then you
list.
have to, we're still constrained by the linearity of the medium.
Yeah, I know. But in heaven, I think I can hold multiple conversations at
No,
once. Maybe it's
actually,
part of
if
the.
like this, the Apple Vision Pro, I'm sure you could just have all bunch of threads
Oh
going.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That won't make us dumber and more distracted. We'll be like, oh my gosh. Yeah, just outsource that thing to a third party. Now you got memory over here. Um, no, so yes, the tyranny is in my head. That's like the word
Yeah.
that's still bouncing around.
Yeah,
The
you said something about I wanted to pick up on something. You said something
uh,
were you saying something like tyranny is paganism? What? You said
oh
something like
yeah,
you think of it. I just how are you framing that? That's really interesting. Like might makes right, is that kind of the thing?
yeah, for sure.
The principles of worldly
Yeah,
power being
yeah,
God.
yeah, precisely.
Okay.
So there is I think the broadest way you could characterize paganism, and I know like neo-pagans will get mad at this because I think they're romantics and yeah, anyways. But it's a closed ceiling on existence that ultimately ends with man. There's no openness to the world system, and so everything is explainable in terms of this world. Even gods
Yeah.
are part
Correlation.
of this world in some ways. And so um, when when I see when I was thinking about tyranny, it was because um, tyranny is always effective by the same methods that the technologies I was describing are effective, namely that they create the very social conditions of lack of need that they resolve in the figure of the tyrant. So this is just part of classical philosophy. If you ask what makes an effective tyranny, and they really meant it, like they knew which of their Caesars were tyrants or which of their leaders were tyrants, and they would name them as such. Well, this guy was a tyrant. And so they understood tyranny to be a particular regime, a particular way of organizing human society. And the way that it works is that you hurt people. And then this allows you to then reveal yourself, man, as their healer. So the tyrant is the one who tries to atomize people, to destroy friendships, to make sure that people don't have a lot of communication with others. Um, Hannah Arendt writes about this really wonderfully in The Origins of Totalitarianism, where she describes this sort of fundamental precept that if a tyrant is going to be effective, then you have to have a lack of community, a lack of love. So he can rule very effectively over atomized, lonely, and scared people. He cannot rule very effectively over healthy, thriving communities of love and support and power. It just doesn't fit with what he's about. Um, and so there's this way in which all tyranny is a technology. It's a sort of technicalization of politics because instead of it instead of politics being like, well, we have lacks that confront us that are real, widows, orphans, who's going to build the wall? Where are we going to dig their ditch? That kind of thing. It sees human life itself as an opportunity for power grab and says, where can we afflict wounds in order to have power, in order to
It's
appeal as healers? And this is what I see in our
interesting.
technologies, that we basically live under a certain tyranny of technocrats, in a very broad sense. I'm not saying there's like one guy who's controlling all the strings. I just think that the way power works in our society is that people are becoming increasingly lonely, sick, atomized, scared. COVID was a great time for feeling all of those feelings, and then
Great opportunity to solve those feelings too.
they were solved with a lot of technology, which we enjoy some of the benefits of right now. Like the healing gave immense power, to the people that could provide the healing. And so we now increasingly live under a kind of um, dictatorship of, I don't know what to call them, technopolists. What I mean, there's probably a couple words for them, but people who basically provide the healing and the solution to our atomized existence, which they simultaneously promote through the constant use of their products. And it's sort of a spiral upwards for them because they get more profit thereby, more power, and a spiral downwards, I think, for society as a whole. It's bleak, but that is, I think, the situation we're in.
I don't disagree with that being the situation we're in. I'm always seeking solutions to whatever problem's being described. And you might have given a hint when you were talking about the Romans and they could tell which of their leaders were tyrants. So it assumes, just in that, like you gave me a glimpse,
Yeah, sure.
it assumes like that the empire is sometimes acts like a tyrant and sometimes doesn't act like a tyrant. Could it be the case that liberalism itself, or the system of technology that we are living in and under, sometimes becomes tyrannical and sometimes does not? Does it not phase through like some sort of pulse or palpitation?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think that I think that liberalism is always relying on really good things in order for its existence. This is what I was trying to describe when saying like the reason liberalism succeeds is not because we go into foreign countries and say you should really read John Locke and the Leviathan. It's going to change your life. That doesn't happen. What happens is we provide some good that is real. And usually we do it not because of liberalism, but because of a sense of justice, like almost a medieval sense of justice. I mean, think about the Iraq War, for instance. It's like you can cynically describe it as a sort of way of getting American values and American democracy into the Middle East. But the actual motivation of it was frankly medieval, which is something the left seemed to recognize, which is like, there's bad guys. We have to kill them because we know what, we're not bad guys. We're the just guys, and we're going to go do it.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is to say a lot of things, but I just want to clarify that I think liberalism is always parasitic upon goods like that. The real good of freedom. It's real. You should not be crushed into the ground by dictators. You should not be um, denied basic rights. And it's okay to talk about them as rights if that's effective. Like, um, these things are real, but what liberalism does is it imagines itself as ultimately imagines itself as the source of these things. Whereas when I look at it, it's just like every now and then it restores what is proper to man. So what I mean is like, uh, I
I
mean that
think I see it. I see it.
you don't have freedom because you have um, everyone equally sort of fearful of the state and its police and the enforcement of law. You have freedom because freedom is proper to man. Because God loves us and he wants us to freely love him. And from this basis, we can derive that there's a certain right to be free and there's a right not to have your movements dictated to you. And what I find liberalism, and sometimes this is in the guise of just America, or sometimes it's in the guise of the EU, but ultimately the philosophy itself tries to take credit for those goods and says, yeah, freedom is a product of the state that we grant to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's sort of what I see happening both in liberalism as a technologization. I got to learn to say that word of politics.
I think you just made it up. So it's
But it's
okay.
also present in every technology where it's like Facebook's a good example of this, right? Where it's like, there'll be an ad for Facebook. Say there were still ads for Facebook. There'd be an ad and it would say something like, you know, Facebook, bringing your friends close to home or whatever. Or like love. It's what makes a Subaru a Subaru. Or Coors Light, the cold thing goes back to the Coors Light. At the beginning of this podcast, we were just discussing how Coors dares to take the credit for the temperature of their beer, which is the one thing that you decide to do to it by putting it in your fridge. But um, I sure hope it is Coors, actually. I'm saying that it's the Rockies, they turn blue. But in each case, I think you can see the common form of modernity, which is that
Huh.
um, we're having our nature sold back to us as a product. We're having freedom sold back to us as a product. We're having order sold back to us as a product. We're having communication sold back to us as a product. We're having sexual arousal sold back to us as a product. We're having community sold back to us. We're having emotion, the ability to communicate emotionally,
Yeah.
transformed into a product that we
Yeah.
can then buy or rent from a third party.
Yeah.
And I think the disgust and the feeling and the reason why anyone would say, I need to listen to a podcast about technology is because there's a sense of wanting to just scrape it all off and to acknowledge that, no, I don't need you. All of this stuff needed me. I, as a person, have gifts. I can communicate emotionally. I am free. I am loved. Like, I don't need 1,000 crutches and 1,000 different, I mean, not really 1,000, it's really like six different tech companies to provide me the goods of the earth. Like I have that as birthright as a child of God. And what you're doing
Mm.
is, and I speak to the obviously the technocrats who are listening here. What you're doing is selling me my own life back at a price, and then profiting thereby.
Okay.
Uh, and I
Okay.
think that's the rant.
Okay. And I just want to add to that. Beautiful rant. I wish we could just
Thanks,
end
man.
the podcast now, but I still have you for 12 more minutes, according
Yeah,
to
man.
my tyranny. Um,
I submit. I submit.
so you're making a critique that precedes the critique of social justice or culture war stuff. The culture war stuff is, it's about these companies selling us fairness. Like, don't sell me
Yeah.
fairness.
Yeah.
Don't sell me anti-racism.
Right. Right. Right.
Sell me freedom. It's
Yeah.
and it goes back to like the conservative, like they go after Bud Light or whatever. Like, no, sell me that shit beer
Yeah.
without the AGP mail on it.
That's
Like,
totally it,
I
man.
don't want the fake woman. I just want the fake beer.
Right.
So
Right.
go back to selling me freedom. But what you're doing is preceding that by saying no, you're already lost. And so it makes me think that the critique of technology, even though you're using technology, is to use technology to wake people out of technology so that they can remember the relationship between you and tech. You use the tech doesn't use you, and it's going to do
Yeah.
everything possible to use you. Don't let it do that. And here's how it
Totally.
does that. But you
Yeah.
still that but it's not you're not going to be able to not use the technology. You're not going to be able to not use the technology. Like the guy who can't get
Yeah.
around the car. Like you just can't get around it. I mean, you can go and live the Amish life, and they're reproducing very well,
Yeah, I think so.
doing
Yeah.
very
I believe
well.
so. I believe so. Although they are having a difficulty in farming and having to get into construction a lot to make it all work. So it's not, no one
Oh,
is
it's it.
immune. No one is immune.
Oh, okay. So like they're meeting a ceiling
I think in some
with
respect, I
their
mean,
tech.
what do I know?
Interesting. Okay.
It
Yeah.
seems like in some respects. Yeah, the Bud Light example is really perfect, right? Because the thing that at the end of the day, and I'm not after people's purity. I think it's like it's great to be mad at what they did. And if that's all you do in the day, that's fine. That's fine. But obviously, the thing to really be mad at Bud Light about is already happened, which is that our ability to make beer for ourselves and for our community and to enjoy it has steadily, through a process of monopoly and propaganda, been usurped and made into
Hmm.
the sole province of a company. Is it even American? It is American, right? I'm thinking of
Probably.
Anheuser-Busch. That's not,
Yeah.
that's a different one. That's owned by Ambev, which I believe is Brazilian and Austrian. It's a conglomerate. It's a global thing. That's my point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
yeah. So the question is what the question of technology when we look at it and yeah, we're in it. It's everything. It's the beer can. It's what's on the beer can. It's what people are saying about what's on the beer can. But in every case, we have to ask, is what's happening here a healing of a lack that's real, or is it the maintenance and creation of a lack that it profits some to continuously heal? Like, are you giving me what I need, and or are you making a wound fester in such a way that you always apply the balm? And increasingly, I think our age is just letting wounds fester. Gender, I think, I've learned a lot from listening to you, Ben, because what strikes me with so many of your guests is the sense that, and sometimes it's anger and sometimes it's acceptance, but it's always the sense that something which is given for whatever reason, sometimes extremely legitimate reasons, has become problematized as a wound in their life. And then a commodity was presented as a solution to that wound. And they were told in some respect, in some way, if you buy this, if you buy that, if you do this, if you do that, if you enter into this relationship of dependence, then you can have that thing that were deprived of as long as you stay in this circle, stay in this relation, keep taking these drugs, keep taking these pills.
Yeah.
And I don't, what I think is so beautiful about the transgender experience right now is I think that they're kind of on the front line of what we're all experiencing within a technological society. Like they're really experiencing it in their bodies. Um, this sense of our lives not being our own.
Yeah.
Um,
Modification and commodification.
yeah, and yeah. So yeah, I do think that a critique of technology is necessary, and that the I don't have um, a grand solution to it besides conversion to Catholicism, as I'll always
Of course.
suggest
Yeah.
to anyone
For
who will
sure.
listen, whether they like it or not. Sorry. And the reason is it's manifold, but I guess the biggest things is that I don't think you can resist a a technocratic empire that operates as a tyranny, where it inflicts wounds in order to heal them, in order to create its own necessity, if you have no alternative source of order and no alternative, no definite description of the good. So in some ways, this isn't an argument for Catholicism per se, as much as it's an argument for anythingism, like become someone particular, become a
Yeah.
character, become
Yeah.
grounded, become real. Do not be indefinitely open to suggestion, and do it soon. Like don't spend a 20-year trek figuring out who you are, because during that time you've got uh, you're essentially manipulatable within a world where that really is the main driver of the economy, is the manipulating of people into new shopping habits. That's why when there's a recession, they just tell you to buy things. What? Anything. Just make sure you're doing
Yeah.
it.
Here's $10. We'll take it back to you
Yeah,
from you at the
totally.
tax day, but here you go. Go buy something.
So I defend first a conversion to anythingism. It's not. I hope no one does anything really strange on the basis of this. But once you have um, a good that you recognize and you assent to, and it becomes an authority in your life, then you have the means by which to judge your own society and by which to ask the question of whether technology, um, in any particular instance, is good for you. You can't do that without a definite description of the good, because all that, if you don't have it, all they're going to say is, yeah, well, what's good for you is porn. What it's good for you is pleasure. What's good for you is um, being able to get airline miles and then eventually spend them on a trip or something like that. Like,
Huh.
but when you define the good, where you say something to the effect of like, what is good in life is to become virtuous or some, you know what I'm saying? Like, it could be the most basic thing in the world. Then you at least draw a line in the sand and say, like, um, now I have a definite world which admits and does not admit certain behaviors, certain devices, certain technologies, certain companies telling me to do certain things.
Yeah. But
Um,
then
yeah.
that's an opportunity for me as a beer maker to say, oh, I can make a virtue beer,
And
truth,
this obviously
truth
is
beer.
absolutely,
And they'll buy my beer because now I'm reflecting their values back at them. That's
it
what I
is
want.
exactly what you would expect from a society like ours, that there's like the main stuff, and then there's like the identitarian second tier stuff that gets sold. So it's like, well, who was it? Someone was doing chocolates that were like he, him with
Yeah,
nuts.
hers, yeah.
She. So
Yeah.
that's great. So it picks up both markets. So you got your main market, which is apparently
Chocolate.
like this woke chocolate. Well, it's chocolate, but it's chocolate now with like a message. You eat my chocolate, you are, making sure you're not committing transgenocide. And then, but that itself produces another market. It's brilliant. So then you have
It's awesome.
this cleanup of more cash of people who would not otherwise buy crap chocolate are suddenly buying chocolate because they've got to prove that they're this identity. So obviously, I'm not saying stay at anythingism, but I do say that even in that pathetic move to just something secondary, at least you see a great reduction of what's
Uh,
possible, because you say,
yeah.
hey, no, I'm not going to get that. I'm going to get this.
Yeah.
I'm going to drink Black Rifle coffee or whatever it is. Like you
Yeah,
have.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Is it embarrassing? Yeah, it's a little bit, but maybe that's a good first step. But then ultimately, why I think you can never stay there, and why I think conversion to the true church is necessary is because only a commitment not to like uh only to a commitment to a good that is transcendent and to a truth that is true no matter what, and to ultimately a person, I think, is what saves you from just further tyranny. Um, you can think of it as, in some ways, deciding to enter into a path of becoming a saint or becoming characterized and becoming particular all the way down.
Yeah.
Like sometimes as a Catholic growing up, you read stories about the saints having this sort of um, incredible ability to resist temptation. And this is very typically just done in a moralistic way. It's like this one saint in Ethiopia can walk into a brothel and speak to a prostitute for an hour in the middle of a brothel and walk out completely unscathed because he just saw the child of God that needed help. And um, but there's a great beauty to these stories, not simply because they give us a sort of ideal for our own moral lives, but also because they show that there is a degree of devotion, a degree of becoming particular, whereby even like you just become resistant to any particular suggestion outside of the suggestion that comes from what's true and what's good and what really is beautiful. Uh, that's the ideal.
Huh.
But this, I don't say this without understanding that it does require faith, that what I'm saying is in fact the good and the true and the beautiful, and not just, something being posed as such in order to sell Catholic mugs, Catholic
Do you
things.
guys have Steuben mugs Yeah,
We don't
New
have
Polity merch.
we
Lanyards, at least.
no, we have something. We have magazines. Oh, and we have a conference. Can I do it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Sell it.
I don't think we have I don't think we have mugs, but maybe we should. Um so we are actually going to be talking about technology in Stubenville, Ohio on May 23rd to May 25th with all sorts of wonderful people. That's this year, in case you're watching in 2025. You can't come. 2024. This year's your year. See that optimism? I think you're still going to be getting views in 2025.
I think
Yeah.
this is going to still get me something else.
Um, we have Matthew Crawford. He's a great guy. He's at UVA. He's most known for the book Shop Class as Soulcraft, which is
Hmm.
just a really great defense of getting to know things from the inside and getting to know technology and thus master it.
Yeah,
So a lot of understandably, a lot of what people hear, they can think like, "Oh, I know your solution. It's to go out and live in a hut and, scratch the ground with a stick and hope that it rains so you can catch water in your mouth or something like that."
yeah, yeah.
It's not the case, and one of the great ways to be convinced of this is to read Matthew Crawford, where he thinks like it's actually a deeper understanding of technology that gives us mastery over it, that allows us to actually know it as a tool, as something we can
Yeah.
fix when it breaks, as something that we can order towards ends beyond the ends of the party that made them. And this is how he understands auto mechanics, and he writes brilliant philosophical treatises on the basis of his experience with like Volkswagens. And so I think
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Matthew Crawford,
Christ in the art of motorcycle maintenance.
yeah,
Right?
I mean, he should have. He should have. I don't know if Matthew's Catholic. Praying for him. But he did write Why We Drive, which is phenomenal. It was a bestseller recently, and it is probably the best defense of cars I've ever read. I think in the end doesn't land all the way because I think he starts too early. Like he doesn't really answer the question, should we have cars at all? He's more answering the question like, given that we have cars,
Okay.
shouldn't we be really good at driving and not go to automation? And I think he makes a very convincing case. But the conference is called Should We Therefore Destroy the Servers? Because ultimately we're going to ask all of our participants the question of if you have this critique of technology, what is it that prevents you from blowing up the material foundations of the internet, for instance? Like, isn't that a consequence of our thought here? And I think it'll lead to some really good discussion. I just wanted to invite people to Steubenville for that, and yourself included.
Yeah,
It's gonna be a
absolutely.
great conference. I
It's
think
like
I'm
a 2 day
debating.
conference then.
Yeah, well, three actually. So it starts on the Thursday
Okay.
evening of the 23rd
And
and
there
ends on
will
the
be
25th.
beer, right?
Lots of beer, lots of
Okay.
bread.
Bread.
I
Yeah.
think I'm debating Chat GBT at some point, and
Really?
it should be fun.
You going
There
toe
will
to
also
toe?
be, yeah, gonna look at the beast, see if it looks back. Uh, so that should be fun. There's also, I mean, Steubenville's just fun. I really encourage people to visit and join us. And there will be a lot of prayer, like we're doing the Liturgy of
Hmm.
the Hours and praying during the day. I say that both to encourage any believers and also to caveat that you don't need to be freaked out by this if you're not a believer and you just want to come down for the takes on technology.
It's
Well,
a
but I
laying on
want to
of
tell
hands
you,
is purely consensual.
yes, we're all consenting in the spirit and we're all praying for you regardless. So you might as well come down and see it happening.
Yeah.
This is what a lot of atheists don't realize is they're the church in its own perspective has already comprehended them and is praying for their salvation. And so it's not I mean it's oppositional from the perspective of the atheist to the church, but from the church it's just like you're on just a very weird stage of your path to conversion, which will happen through the power of Christ, which he's given over to us, actually, wildly, irresponsibly, some might say, but here we are.
Holding conferences, saving souls.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, it's a really good time. So yeah, Steubenville, May 23rd, 24th, 25th. Um, use the code Benjamin Boyce is based to get a
Oh, really?
0% discount.
Yeah, okay, there we go.
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't throw up an error on your servers.
What about you, Benjamin? How are you?
What am I selling?
Yeah, what's going on? What do you have? You got a pitch?
You know what I do? I need to get a shirt and stuff, but I don't know my brand because it's just conversation. So I need like a symbol or something to put it on a shirt. Because I don't want my face on a shirt.
You
Um,
know what you could do? You could,
maybe a waveform of my voice saying conversation.
you know those like Tibetan like chant bowls that
Yeah,
you run these
yeah,
along? You could brand those with conversation,
yeah.
and
The
I would
the
certainly buy
voice
one.
voice of seasoning would be a good one. Um, I
Yeah,
could have
steak
a
like a rub,
yeah, like a rub. Yeah, no, that's good actually. I should do that actually. I could probably get some Chinese company to make it for me now. Can I ask you one more question?
anything, please.
You said something you were going through how you force God upon your offspring, and you brought up baptism, and you hand
I
them
was
off to
being
this
somewhat
God.
rhetorical, but go ahead.
I'm
Yeah,
being somewhat
good,
facetious
good.
myself,
All
but
right.
you hand them over to the godparent, and you said something there. There was like a line, and you said it in a joking manner because I think it like you were co-opting the liturgy. So
Yeah. Well,
could you just
sorry.
explain the godfather relationship or the godparent relationship to the child? Just because, like, it's been
Are
in the
you
back
just
of my.
queuing me up for like a ginormous thing here? I feel like someone must have told you to do this. I'm literally studying and
You're
trying to write
very.
this essay
Are you
on
serious?
godparents. Yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna do it. Thank you. Wow, this is amazing.
I could
Um,
hear it. See, that's how good I am. I could hear
so
there's
the
something
the
there.
I know you're that it is true. You do have a special gift here. Like the subtleties of conversation aren't obliterated by the pixels, and I appreciate that. Um, receive from the font. So this is
Yeah.
the way of describing one's godchildren in the Middle Ages. You would speak of your children, and then you'd speak of your children you received from the font. This comes from ultimately the teaching that in Christ we are a new creation. So baptism is a second birth. This time you're born not simply into the world as a beloved creation of God, but you're born into a community, to a people within that world who are devoted to God. It is the place where fallen humanity goes to be redeemed. And so it's a new community. And the thing about birth is that it comes from others. You are born from someone else. A birthday party is a marvelous thing because it's that time when people tell you what you cannot know except for that you receive it in faith, that you were born on a particular day weighing a particular amount. You
Yeah.
believe it about yourself. And in the Christian tradition, you get a godfather and a godmother. It wasn't always just a godfather and a godmother. You could have like three godfathers and one godmother. Um, but it came over time to more and more closely represent the biological family in order to signify that a new birth with a new family has happened. And the relationship is marvelous. I mean, how do I put it? What's clear historically in Europe and also very clear currently in like Latin American countries is that it's not just the relationship between the godfather and the godchild that's relevant. The godfather is related in what was referred to as co-paternitas between the child's biological father and himself. So that was seen as one of the major motivations for becoming a godparent was not simply the relation to the child, which involves the duties of respect and love and gift giving, which maybe I'll speak about in just a second, but also a similar relationship of fraternity um, to the biological father of the child. And in the Middle Ages, this was so strong that it created an incest prohibition. So your fraternity was considered as real, your spiritual affinity, as blood affinity. And so a god father of a child could not marry the biological mother of that child, even if she became widowed, because that relationship was established as one of brother and sister. Um, Now, this is really important because Christianity is one way to look at Christianity, which I think is true, is that it takes as its an ideal the spreading out of what is present in the family into the whole order of society.
Yeah.
So we've all, I think, I hope, even if just a glimmer, or even in the brokenness of our families, I hope we've all experienced what's very unique about it, which is that there's an unconditional love and affection, and that you do things for each other not because you're weighing prices and you're acting as individuals trying to maximize your utility or something like that, but you in fact love each other and you want to give. I've noticed this about the world, that things that seem like impossible are very quotidian in the family. For instance, like sharing, like we just have we're very happy to share goods in common in the family. But the only way we seem to be able to imagine that outside of the family is like violence and communism.
Huh.
Um, and so we have anyway, the point is simply that there is a relationship in the family that I believe is the continued, how do I put it? It's the continued presence of God even in a fallen world. That in our Catholic tradition, we have a wedding blessing, and when the bride and the groom are blessed, marriage is extolled in the blessing over them as the one gift that was not destroyed by the fall nor washed away by the flood. So it's a sort of continuity of Eden throughout the world, a continuity of man's original relationship to other men, and also to things like authority and freedom and God. It's sort of present there. All right. All of which is to
So
say that, yeah, go ahead.
within Christianity, there is this, just to finish
There
your
is an
thought.
expressed desire to break open the family like a vessel and have it spread over the world and come to characterize all relationships of power. So if I could explain, like, here's what Christianity wants to do with all of us.
Yeah.
It wants to take every relationship where one person has more power, it has power over another person, has more power than another person, and it wants to familiarize that relationship so that it's one of father to son or mother to daughter. And it wants to take all of those relationships that are equal or seemingly equal, and it wants to make them relationships between brothers and sisters. This is expressly in the Gospels, in the New Testament. I mean, we know this, I think, colloquially because Christians are always referring to each other as brother and sister, but but it's actually true. I mean, there is a expressed desire to create brothers of all the world. So like everyone is related to everyone else, with the love and charity that is normal in the family, but becomes contested once we move out of the family into this sort of broader thing called the world. Um, so that is sacramentally present in godparentage. What I mean by sacramentally is it's not there yet. Obviously, it's not perfect. It doesn't come to characterize the whole world. It's not the eschaton. It's not the kingdom of God. It's not what we can expect. But it is a deliberate taste of the goal, because the relationship between godparents and biological parents is one that ought to be governed by that kind of mutual charity and friendship and lack of dominance or unfreedom in any way, that we believe will characterize all relationships eventually. It's saying, no, let's do this now. Let's give it a name. You're my copater is how they would refer to it. Or you're my comater. That's how they would refer to it for women, between biological and godparents. And we even still know these words because compadre is just that in the Spanish. So if someone has a compadre in America, we just think of this as like, it just means friend. But it's
Yeah.
just the Spanish version of copater. So it was describing the relationship of godfather to
Wow.
biological parent. And what I want to say about all this, you're so patient, is that um, the church, as it spreads, is not simply spreading individuals who come to join in the same belief. That would be a mistake. It is spreading familial relations. Indeed, in the Middle Ages, especially with the incest prohibitions that applied to spiritual brothers and spiritual sisters, it became necessary to evangelize and spread because a given community would not be able to marry after a certain point of becoming each other's godparents
Yeah.
and god siblings. And so there was built into the very logic of a evangelical movement, a kind of breaking open outwards, finding new people. Uh, and I think that's really important to recognize that's where, in some ways, the spread of Christianity came from, is the extension of a family. And we often don't even understand history, especially medieval history, and why we got to where we are now, because we don't know the relations of spiritual affinity. Like, for instance, it was just standard um, that if someone who was a criminal who had that fell under your jurisdiction or your authority in some way was your spiritual kin, that you would have more mercy on them. Like there was a understanding that the way we would do politics in a Christian society would be related to the kind of spiritual affinity and kinship that we had with others and our
Hmm.
obligations toward them. Now, obviously, there's perversions of this, like the movie Godfather, where
Yeah.
all you see is the perversion, right? That there's a sort of uh, totally de-Christianized version of this, where it's just power relations through the God parentage. But I actually think that is a closer image of the God parent in its efficacy within Christianity than just the idea that it's a purely symbolic sort of, I don't know,
Yeah.
a nice thing to give to your friend.
Speaking
Uh,
of giving, you were going to say something about gift giving?
oh yeah, so it is still characteristic in our society that godparents are expected to give to godchildren. Um, and it is also especially true in Latin American societies that the um, the relationship of compadrazgo or
Huh.
co-paternitas or co-maternitas, whatever it was, is expectation of gift giving on traditional days, on the day of the child's baptism, Christmas, obviously, Easter. Often there are more godparents for the confirmation of the child into the church. So there's a lot of it. I think what most impresses me, I mean, for instance, what most impresses me is it takes the demands of Christianity and the gospel, and it gives to them an institution whereby you are expected to do them, where your honor is involved. For instance, to spend a whole night sitting up with a sick person, right, is typically considered a extravagant act of kindness. Like what a good soul that he didn't have to do this, but he went out of his way to do this to, to follow the dictate of the gospel, to take care of the sick. But if you are in Latin America and you are the copater to the sick man, then you better be there, or you would be ashamed to not be there. Like it would bring dishonor upon you. Now, in some ways, it's a great risk to institutionalize the the Christian life, but it's also a sign of, I think in some ways it's just worth the risk. It's a great confidence too to say this is so good um, that we can make people identified by their obligation to give gifts, which every Christian should do, to stay with the sick, which every Christian should do. So godparents, in their relationship to both their godchildren and also to their god siblings, become, as it were, signs for what should apply in every case. And this is why I call them sacramental. It's like they have as a duty and an obligation a sharing of goods in common, the sacrifice of one for the other, the courtesy of mutual respect, the lack of lust in some cases in sexual relations. That's pretty typical. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and yeah, I think because we are an incarnate people, like we're not just people who believe things, we're people that need tangible evidence of the efficacy of something. We need to see it in the flesh. And I think that's what God parentage seems to respond to, is to say, oh no, we can live out the gospel and we're going to do it in this little place here between
Yeah.
he and I, she and I. Um, but that it doesn't end there, that it's an example for behavior, and it's a sign of hope. Okay. How's that?
Wonderful. There was something.
Yes.
That was something, Mark. It just goes back to what you're saying about truth and pragmatic. Like we have to see the proof. You have to see the proof. It either works or it doesn't work. So, well, I don't want to reduce everything down into the pragmatics of it
Yeah.
or the efficacy of it, because that you're just looking at the afterways. You're not seeing the essence for what it is. You still need to see that. If it didn't give you guys, if it doesn't manifest in relationships of love, and if it doesn't model a family that's not a tyranny, then if it
Right.
models a family, if it says, okay, we're going to make the world in the image of a family, and its version of a family is a tyranny, which is the problem
Yes.
that people have with it because they just see it as a tyranny. They see
Yes.
the relationship between father and child is
Yeah.
domineering and
Yeah.
forcing Christ down the baby's,
Totally.
neuronic pathways and
Yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah.
if it shows and displays love, and you brought up shame and honor, of course, which are still effects of a primary
Yeah.
reality there.
Yeah. 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 There's no mechanism here. Like if we are we either really believe and we're really good and we really become virtuous and we really love each other. There is no way of having that without our personal subjective faith, our personal subjective assent,
Yeah.
and it has to be real. And I think the godparentage thing is a really good example because it's obvious that it can become, um, like you can imagine it certainly becoming mechanical, as if we just enter these roles and follow the dictates of honor and shame, we will essentially
Yeah.
get a Christian society by behaving like automatons. I think that is true perversion, and that's why I think Christianity can't be like forced by law or something like that, because it would attempt to create through automatism the kingdom of heaven, which can only be created by free assent and love to the truth. There are days I would like to be able to build the Christian world mechanism, but
Yeah.
we all have our temptations. That's not the way. So even in the godparent uh relationship, everyone knows this who's been given the gift of being godparent. Like nothing's automatic. You got to love and to sacrifice and to pray for the child and for the other family and really enter into that in a real way. And that's how all Christianity is. It's either done really or it's not done at all, it
Yeah.
seems to me.
Mark, I'm so glad that your people reached out to my people and
Yeah, Alex is great.
got
I
you to
appreciate it.
set aside some of your time.
So this
You
is
guys
the
have
second time that we have discussed something other than the thing that I really want to discuss.
what was it that you really wanted to
I want to
discuss?
do gender, man.
Wait, what? We haven't done that
Gender.
yet? We still
No,
haven't
we
gotten around to
talked
gender?
about liberalism. Now we're doing some tech. And the one thing that's like the reason that I know you and you know me is because Maria and I were talking about gender and you thought it wasn't entirely daft. And then you had me on to talk about something else, Maria to talk about being a nun. She's not a nun, but
No, she decided. I don't know. I need to catch up with her.
yes.
Check in on
But
her.
gender is,
It's always here. Well, it'll be here. Like, I don't know if this podcast is going to be around in a year, but I know that gender is going to be around in a
yeah,
year.
yeah,
And
yeah. It will
so, given that you're around, I'm around,
make it
gender's
happen.
still on the table. It
All
will
right, all
happen.
right. I'm gonna hold
I
you to it.
promise.
Thank you.
Right.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you. You're
Yeah,
looking great.
I
Look
appreciate you
healthy.
too. Yeah, thanks for. Oh, yeah, I need to go take a walk. And I'll link work to New Polity. And you guys have anything coming up on your web channel podcast? Do you have a series that you guys are going through right now?
We actually are going to Maria and I are working on 6 episodes to continue a discussion about gender.
Great.
So it'll
And
happen.
what's the where are you guys going with this? Or is there like a plot arc for this
Yeah,
season?
we thought what we would do is try to discuss the sources of transgenderism in a way that do justice to the phenomenon, because it seems to us that people aren't just crazy and losing their minds. They're not just saying obviously false things, but there is a number of influences that have led us to the place where a normal person can reasonably say either there's no such thing as man or woman, it's all social construction, or I am a woman and my body is male. These sorts of things
Yeah.
um, are the result of a great number of influences. Economic, like the newness of our economic system is not without its effects. There are symbolic differences. So Maria and I discuss in particular what it means for a world to have gone from living under the ideal of the virgin as the symbol of perfection, being not a reproductive family, but actually for that family to produce someone devoted entirely to God in the singleness of their sex. Um, and then why that ideal was lost and what effect that has on people now becoming men and women and how they understand that. Because it seems to live under a different flag, a different ideal, which seems to be just reproductive family when all of Christian history up till the Reformation lived under the flag of the Virgin.
Mm.
Seems relevant, seems like a
Yeah.
thing that would have effects.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
talk about the medicalization of sex, especially in the 19th century. You've discussed a lot of this, Kraft Irving and Carpentier and Otto Weininger. Have you ever gotten to read Otto Weininger?
No,
Oh man,
Otto Weininger. That sounds like a
it's a trip.
heavy, heavy dude.
Yeah, kind of. He doesn't like women at all.
Okay.
Very down on the whole idea. Um, anyway, so the medicalization of sex. We wanted to kind of answer the question. Uh, you remember there was a Supreme Court justice. She was being, not interviewed. That's too polite a term. Like hassled. With a bunch of questions by Congress, right? They're the ones that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
put them through the ringer. And someone was like, "What is a woman?" You know, just jumping on that moment. And she answered, "I don't know. I'm not a biologist." You remember this?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it like that itself requires a certain explanation. Like, why is the authority the scientist? Like, what shift happened? You know,
Yeah.
so obviously people ate lunch with things they called women long before they had biological investigations of them. So the authority who can say what a woman is has become extremely medical and really was. I mean, it was, oh man, there's some
Mm,
weird science leading
yeah.
up into the
Yeah. I
21st
mean,
century.
still the birthing uh industry is still
Yeah.
trying to figure out what a woman is, how to treat a
Yeah,
woman.
right. Exactly. And I think we have this, we have a very, it's almost like quaint view of the last like 50 years where we think that everything was great in the 50s. And so we were like, that's when it's like the Bud Light thing, right? Like, remember when Bud Light was just bad piss beer? I want to go back to that. Well, in terms of sex and gender, it's like, you remember when doctors told you about your anatomy and that was how you knew what a woman was and a man was, and they didn't lie to you. That's what I want. I want the power of doctors on the
Yeah.
side of conservative sex. And now we've got doctors on the side, what I mean? But obviously the question is, well, why doctors? Why
Yeah.
scientists?
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah.
So we want to discuss that. Um, yeah, we want to talk about abortion and contraception and um, the way certain social moral practices prep us for uh, transgenderism in the way we view the person. because we're not just believing creatures. Um, we tend to move from one kind of practice to another kind of practice with ease, um, which everyone knows. Like if you want to corrupt people, you bring them through a series of increasingly corrupt practices until they're sacrificing babies to Moloch. But it's not like you start with that, right? No,
Well,
so
here we are.
I didn't mean to be mean to the Masons. Come on. I'm just kidding. I don't think they
It's not
deserve.
just the Masons, unless they're behind this whole thing.
No. I mean, the trouble with pointing the finger at anyone is you can always point the finger at someone else. This is what I do when someone's got like a main driver of conspiracy. I just introduce another person. Like the
Okay.
Masons. It's not the Masons. It's the Marxists. Well, maybe the Masonic Marxists, but don't forget about the homosexual lobby. So then you start adding characters, and then eventually you just start talking about. Turns out sin is sin.
Yeah, we're just in a
And you,
fallen world.
yeah, and sinners tend to group together because everyone loves having buddies.
There's safety, yeah, falling in numbers.
Yes. Anyway, so yeah, we discuss each source, and the hope is we're not trying to be exhaustive about it. That was the other thing we learned, I guess, after talking about gender for a while, and then just listening to people for a while, was that um, we felt that people were too prone to think of one or two sources as sort of exhaustive descriptions, and that I mean, I of course I want it to be so. Man, I'd love to just shoot something, and then but no, it is many things, and unfortunately things that we're all complicit in. Like we are all complicit in creating the kind of world in which transgenderism makes sense to some people, even if we're not that person. I think that's true.
Well, you do you. Is this liberalism again? It's liberalism, isn't it?
Well, I mean, sure, I'm sure it is. I don't think we actually have one that's like liberalism. I mean, I kind of wrote that. I wrote an essay called Liberalism's Androgynous Body a while ago. I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but I think the idea was that there's something very fitting to liberalism, and then a presumption of primal androgyny as the basic mode of human existence, and gender being a sort of added phenomenon and not basic.
Hmm.
So yeah, I guess that could be in there. When I say we're all complicit, I just mean like, every act of petty hatred and violence and dismissal and neglect um, is part of a world where all of that matters. All of it makes a difference. And when people try to heal from a world of many sins writ large, they often go to technologies that I think are also damaging in other ways.
Yeah. I just realized it's not Ramadan or Lent, and I don't need to be fasting right now, so I'm gonna go
Go eat.
have
All
some
right.
lunch.
Hey,
You
God
have a
bless.
great time. Links to your work's gonna be down in the description. Always great to hang out with you, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Benjamin, thank you. Thank you for your kindness. Namaste. I'll see you soon.
See you.